live in for the long term, which, someone actually from Marisha Rabinski recently charted just, a couple of boom and bust cycles that Toronto has seen. And she bought her home at the peak of the market, I believe in '88, just before, the market corrected or crashed.
Right.
And she still lives in that same home. So for her, she was indifferent. I suppose as long as you can finance the mortgage and you plan to live there for the long term, I don't know whether the boom or bust cycle matters too much. It should matter more for the investor, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've certainly seen right at the beginning of January, there was a house recently around Edwards Gardens that had 53 offers on it. And it actually ended up selling for about 100% of list. So it started at $999,000. And after the 53 offers came in, sold for $1.9 million. And so, the supply in January this year seems to have dropped even more. And so that, to your point, there is just more and more demand on the housing. And now, most of the houses in Leslieville or Midtown Toronto, you need to have at least 1.3 million just to get in the market. And, I've certainly got clients who, they said to me their budget max is 1.2 or 1.25. And I sort of have to look at them now going, I don't know, we can't find you anything around Yonge and Eglinton. It's just, it's now unaffordable. And I happen to live at Yonge and Eglinton. I'm lucky because I bought my house in 2005. So you're right.
Oh, right, yeah.
I don't care about whether the market goes up or down because I bought it such a long time ago that I've already doubled my money in my property. And I think that the bulk of homeowning Torontonians are in that position where they've been living in their houses for so long that even if the market does dip, it's really not a factor. But to your point, how can it dip when there's so few houses on the market and there's so many people looking? And now, there's rumors about them trying to increase the land transfer tax. So,
I saw that as well.
That's going to affect the supply even more. Have you heard anything else about that land transfer tax?
We covered, when it was first announced, and we covered some of, Ontario Real Estate Association's opposition to it, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm not familiar on exactly what it's going to look like or if it will actually, happen. I did hear something about first-time home buyers possibly getting a break as well. And, they also offered, the province offered, a break for first-time buyers on the provincial tax. Of course, Toronto has its own tax, and it's the only municipality that has its own land transfer tax separately, right? So, but there was a recent break on the provincial side, which provides some ease, and there was some call on Toronto to offer a similar one.
But that was it.
I haven't heard that. I haven't heard any further updates.
Yeah, no, and I've just kind of heard that there's rumors of it, and the Toronto Real Estate Board is putting out a lot of information to try to pressure them not to increase the land transfer tax, but that's really all I've heard about it, I guess sort of recently. On the correction front, I think I find it very interesting that over the past few years, I've noticed a lot of publications, let's say like The Globe and Macleans and Canadian Business, the front cover of January is always, the market's going to crash this year, we're sure. And then, of course, it goes up, 15, 10%. And I just start thinking to myself, why all the fear mongering? I get that they're trying to sell papers, but it does actually get into people's heads. And it's so inaccurate. I guess I always wonder, why don't they ever look back at themselves and go, hey, you know what? We got it completely wrong. We said there was going to be a crash, but the market actually jumped up 15, 17, 20%. What are your thoughts about that, the fear mongering that goes on?
Right. So I have an anecdote, and it's from some of our own coverage. We did a roundup of 6 headlines that got it dead wrong, and it was exactly the kind of coverage that you're talking about. And it's not just the papers. There's I'm not sure if you're familiar with Capital Economics, but they're an economic research firm, and they've been calling for a crash for I don't know how many years, several years. Sooner or later, maybe they'll be right. Even a broken clock tells the time right twice a day phrase. But I think I have a lot of respect for the publications and the journalists. And actually, Rob Carrick of the Globe did link back to our article on the headlines that were dead wrong.
Yeah.
I can't recall if any of the headlines were from the Globe, but so even those involved are aware. I have seen some articles, I won't list which ones by which publications, that do seem to be kind of stoking the flames or just trying to be shocking for clicks.
Yep.
We see this in U.S. election coverage even right now, but I won't get into that as well. No, it's very much a role, and I think you are right. Part of it is, in a broader media sense, this kind of searching for clicks, searching for ad revenue. I do think that's very much a part of it, unfortunately, you know. But I also think there is an element of few people, myself included, are economists. You know, I'm not, and so there's also the chance that they're getting their information from reputable sources, and that kind of messaging gets parroted. You know.
Right.
So I think there's a number of factors. Yeah, I hope I addressed that. But
yeah, I know you did.
I don't think there's a conspiracy or anything, or I don't think it's like some sort of collective agreement, or it might not even be intentional. But it's very much a role. It's very much a part. I try to be balanced in our coverage. At BuzzBuzzHome, we try to be as balanced as possible with that kind of coverage. I hope we don't have too many positive headlines, but I also hope we don't have too many negative ones, you know?
Right. No, that makes sense. I mean, I think what I find interesting about their coverage is that they never acknowledge that they got it dead wrong. You know, it's okay to make a prediction, but I think what's interesting to me is, I mean, of course, when I see their prediction, I know they're dead wrong. And, you know, I'll have friends who argue with me because they're like, oh, but this is an economist. Who are you? But, you know, I think, you know, okay, so a year goes by and whatever publication it is, you got it dead wrong. I guess I feel like I wish everyone would do a little bit more analysis as to why they got it dead wrong. There was, I forgot the name of that movie. I wish I could remember it now, but there was a movie recently about the real estate crash in the U.S. And one of the things one of the things I loved about the movie was how much research these fund managers and portfolio managers actually did to realize that the crash was coming, and it was back in 2007. What I loved about the movie is these guys jumped on a plane, they went down to Florida, they started interviewing people to find out, I think one of them was a stripper, you know, how many properties they owned and how leveraged these people were. And because they were doing these interviews with these mortgage brokers and with people in the market, they could really get a better, clearer, I think, understanding about what was actually going on in the market and sort of the impending crash to come. And so I think my takeaway after watching that movie was, you know, I wish some of those major publications in Canada would actually do research the way those guys did, because I think those guys drew a correct conclusion because they researched it well.
Sure.
Anyway,
fair enough. There's also a budget constraint. Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
With that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
People aren't, you know, paying for a lot of the sources so that they're getting their news from, which, you know, does limit what they can do as well. Mm-hmm. But, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. What do you think the most affordable area across Canada might be these days?
Well, you know, I believe RBC's affordability monitor just came out this morning, but I haven't had a chance to look at it. I think, though, and it's with affordability, it's kind of interesting because you can look at a market and you could see, you know, a home listed for, you know, a fraction of Toronto prices, say, in the East Coast, but then that's just the house price. I mean, how are you going to work there, right? How are you going to finance and live there? It might be more affordable, but there's also a quality of life, lifestyle, and many other factors, right? Mm-hmm. I did see that in the third quarter, Moncton, New Brunswick was considered to be really affordable by that organization I mentioned, Demographia. In fact, of the 9 countries they surveyed and 400 plus metro areas, Moncton figured in at number 5 out of 400 for affordability. And they gauged affordability by comparing the median price of a home with the median family income and then expressing it as a multiple.
Right.
So Moncton, New Brunswick homes were like 2.1 times the median family income. So if you put all your money, which again you probably wouldn't be able to do, but if you put every cent you earned away for 2 years, you'd be able to buy a house in cash out there.
Right, I guess. Or I guess if you have a Toronto home, sell it and then pocket the change, get a house in Moncton and become a barista, and you're going to be okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you know, I wouldn't, you know, I haven't heard any specific anecdotes of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone somewhere had done just that. But yeah, so, you know, the East Coast has the affordability, but it doesn't have the jobs, and that's what we're seeing the you know, skyrocketing Toronto prices and Vancouver prices, as, you know, in addition to foreign buyers, it's still a job market, you know, still proximate to California and Seattle, which are other tech hubs.
Yeah.
These jobs, especially since the oil downturn, and obviously the East Coast, while it, doesn't have the oil fans that the prairies have, it still has, there is an oil industry there as well. But since the oil price took a hitting, there's been even less opportunity out there. But I would say independent of jobs, perhaps look east. But if you're going to retire, perhaps that's the job factor is kind of one that puts a wrench in many talks of kind of affordability.
Yeah, I think that's a huge factor. I mean, it's funny. I remember being in Vancouver visiting a friend. It was probably actually 15 years ago. And even then, Vancouver was super expensive. And I know the friend I was visiting happened to be a doctor. And I just sort of looked at him and I thought, how do people afford to live here? What kinds of jobs do they have? Because Toronto is really, well, I'm going to say the center of the universe, but I know people don't want to hear that. Toronto is really where you have the bulk of the high-paying jobs. So, I mean, it's funny. I could never understand why the Vancouver market was so much more expensive than the Toronto market, yet the jobs aren't even out there. There's obviously a lot of jobs, but not as many jobs as there are in Toronto. And I just think, how do people afford it? There's obviously quite a few renters in the Vancouver market because that's all they can afford to do.
Yeah, their rents are at least as far as recent numbers I was looking at, still more expensive than ours, and that may be why they've been ahead of us for a long time in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think people, I guess, like the weather, the outdoor activities more than anything else. So, the lack of jobs and the unaffordability to live there are just irrelevant to them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, they find a way to make it work, or they head elsewhere. Although I don't know too many Vancouver transplants, because I think that's what you're touching on, the lifestyle, the climate. They find a way to make it work. It's definitely, I don't know if you've ever met many people from the West Coast, but you can kind of just tell.
Yeah.
There's like a different kind of people, the stereotype or the cliche is that more laid back, but I've definitely seen that just in my own encounters.
Yeah, and I mean, they definitely get more frustrated with Toronto, and I think the lack of a ski hill or things like that, but I guess those things don't matter to me.
No, me neither. I go outside as little as possible during these months.
Yeah, you know what? Me too. I hate this weather. I was recently in Thailand. I'm like, that's my comfort zone for weather.
Why'd you come back?
I had to work. It was just a vacation. But, I find I don't love this weather. But you know what? I love the city. I mean, I love the fact that I can do so many different things in Toronto at any given moment. So, that's, I think, what's important to me. And I think that's why, I believe in the real estate in Toronto. Despite what people say about the prices and everything else, I kind of feel like people just need to start getting a little bit more creative about making it work for them, because this is what we've got, Yeah,
absolutely.
So how much do you think Canadians have spent on their homes in 2016 as we talk about, how expensive the prices are?
Sure. Well, and we did recently cover this on BuzzBuzzHome, and it was a total of $263 billion thereabouts. And that's a record. It's an all-time record, but last year was also an all-time record. So this figure, the $263 billion, is up 17.7% over last year, which was the previous record.
Wow.
And economists just attributed that to, you have sales volume increasing, but you also have prices increasing.
Of
so
course.
as add those two factors together, and that explains, it almost going up by a fifth over the previous record.
Right. Now, do you think that there's been an effect on the Canadian market given the U.S. election and people who might want to move here?
Interestingly, now, I'm of the same opinion as CIBC's deputy chief economist, Benjamin Tal. And he actually said to me when I called him shortly after the election, because people were already speculating, the Canadian immigration site had crashed,
right.
Which was widely reported. He said it was nonsense. And he, I believe he analyzed numbers going back. And if you look at, he said, during the Reagan years, Reagan was very unpopular among, a wide faction of the American population. And he said that, the impact that had, people leaving America during the Reagan era, it was marginal. And we did speak about how even if the foreign buyer element is marginal, it can still have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe there will be some impact, but I don't think it's going to be a mass immigration impact that will, have a huge effect on the market, partly because the immigration process, which my colleague Kelsey Podolsky would know more about as well, because she's actually she was born in the States,
Right.
and and she's a permanent